Let's talk about bony articulations and the foot. There's so many important stages of my development, but I think when I started understanding feet, that would be in my top 5. Our feet are what transmit everything from the earth up through our body. They have a really important job of stabilizing our upper body, but also adjusting to the forces from the ground to dissipate shock. And so you can do fantastic footwork without thinking of the bones. Thinning the plantar fascia, working with the Achilles tendon, all the soft tissue restrictions. But if you can just underneath this understand what the foot is about and how gravity is transmitted up through the foot, it will just drastically change the way you work. I can't go into the detail that I do in my other DVD about how to specifically work with this. It just would take too much time. But if you just visualize this, it can immediately change the way you work. And I would recommend taking a workshop in the feet. There's a lot of great people out there offering these classes, or get a DVD or something like that. So the first thing I want to talk about with the feet are the 2 arches. Well, there's actually 3, but I'm going to talk about the lateral and the medial. So I had no idea about this. I was sort of blindly working away for 5 or 6 years. And then when I got this, it just immediately changed everything about, I was actually doing something to happen in the body rather than just doing strokes. So the lateral arch is the 2 metatarsals here and an extremely important bone I'll just mention a little bit more later called the cuboid, and that transmits force straight back to the calcaneus, which then sends force directly straight up through this amazing bone, the talus bone, that I will go into more detail. So lateral arch comes through the calcaneus up the outside of our leg. The medial arch is the 3 metatarsals, the cuneiforms here, and the navicular bone here, which is sort of the medial equivalent of the cuboid bone. It then comes up through the talus bone and directly into the tibia, so that the talus bone is the only bone that sends gravity and shock up through our body. So going back to this cuboid, if you can understand the articular surface here, what it looks like, you can understand why some people have a very rigid foot stuck up in this way into a supinated position. And if we can get, just while we're doing our feel-good work, if you don't want to get really precise, if we can get this cuboid freed from the calcaneus, we're doing a real favor to our people. It can rotate this way and that. It can move into inversion, eversion. You've got a nice flat surface to slide. The key to doing this is to have your hands close together, learn the landmarks, this bony protuberance here of the calcaneus, and then feel where your metatarsal comes here, put your hand on the inside there. Then we can be very precise in how we're moving. If we have our hands too far apart, the flexible aspects of this bone are going to move where the inflexible are not going to. So this is the lateral arch. Here's the medial arch, and the same principles work here. You might notice that the articular surface of the talus bone is much rounder here. It's almost like the humerus, and we've got a concavity in the navicular bone. So that enables a fair amount of inversion and eversion around this axis, but the main issue again is this is where things get stuck. We want for people with high arches to get this movement going, get our hands here and here, and as we're doing all that great soft tissue work, just think about moving those bones, and it'll really transform your work. I will mention that if you have somebody with low arched feet, you're not going to want to mobilize this. It's probably hypermobile here already, so you're going to keep away from that and probably spend your time with people with low arched feet mobilizing the lateral arch so that it dissipates shock, being able to roll here instead of rolling your whole foot into pronation. The other joint, which we'll cover later, is the extremely important joint between the talus bone and the tibia, the Taillow-tibial joint, and this enables our foot primarily to dorsiflex and plantar flex. But to do that, we do need some mobility back and forth. So the same thing here. Work this retinaculum that comes across here. Feel for any restrictions, any buildup of tissue in here. Get very precise and get this foot moving. The other arch I'll just mention very quickly, which is very, very important, is the transverse arch. This arch that goes through here, and what's really important there is a lot of people, if they've been limping, they've lost the ability to dorsiflex the toes, so they walk with a foot bouncing like this instead of the normal movement like that. I find older people, it can totally transform the way that they walk, and it's really important for somebody that's had knee surgery, a sprained ankle, hip restrictions. The first thing we do when we start limping is we lose this joint. So I'll be demonstrating this, but getting this joint to move and able to have our foot push us off forward rather than a stiff joint here requiring us to walk like this.